Hello Galaxy, I'm Chris Pirillo, and I wanted to talk about the iPhone X's sensor housing, or as it's affectionately known, the notch, even though it's not really a notch. Let's just keep calling it a notch, shall we? Not a big giant protrusion, which it is. Not a big black nipple at the top of the screen that you just can't get around. Apple is making it this way by design. This is not an accident. This is not something, despite what you may see in counter-arguments, that Apple is going to address in software. They're not going to fix this in software. They're expecting developers are going to work around it in software. And some people are willing to make that trade-off, that visual trade-off, because more screen? Well, let me go ahead and talk about that more screen. Can I? I hope you don't mind, because I really haven't had a chance to show you yet, because it's just been surfaced in my feed. This is a blog, modelessdesign.com. I'll put all the links in the video description, showing you full screen apps or screen real estate, what could be used and what may not be used, specifically with relation to Apple's safe areas on the iPhone X. There are no safe areas on any other iPhone, and the one on the side here, it looks to be the iPhone 8. As opposed to, the notch phone right there. It's nacho phone. Okay, that's a little far. So effectively, what this person did is weeded out the pixels that are being used, but still cannot be used effectively by apps. Let's just put visual barf aside. And as he, basically demonstrates over and over again, you're getting maybe a few more pixels that are usable. You can't necessarily ignore the safe area because developers, the people who create the apps that you use, can't ignore the safe area. They have to embrace everything. And this is what it boils down to. From my experience, quoting the blog, the cost of adapting layout of existing apps to iPhone X's new safe area layout guide is not small for developers. Do you think it's a reasonable effort to gain that amount of additional space on iPhone X? So, developers got to do a fair amount of work to work around the problem. And why? Because there's more screen, right? There's no bezels. Because no bezels, right? But there's more screen. Let's go ahead and talk about that now. Because another graphic has also surfaced in my feed. I'm just going to go ahead and show you. This is really, it's a cute graphic. I appreciate it because it's truthful. It is honest. This is the, someone has stripped away the usable space on a phone and just showed you how small the bezels are on the iPhone X, showing you, look, you get more screen, on the iPhone X. So if you looked at this, it's an obvious choice. Like, the iPhone X is absolutely a winner. But here's the problem. Number one, bezels are not horrible. They're actually usable, especially when you're trying to hold the device. I've demonstrated this time and time again. And number two, you're still dealing with an uneven inclusion. This notch, the nacho phone. You know what? That's, I think, a new title for me. It's not the iPhone X. It's the nacho phone. Well, you can definitely say that about me. It's not my phone, but that doesn't sound as fun. Here's the problem with this cute graphic. It is accurate, it is truthful, but it doesn't speak to phone usability, nor does it speak to usable screen space. So it's accurate and yet inaccurate at the same time. So I get it, I see it, yeah, okay, makes sense. But what happened to usability? What happened to balance? That's not accommodated in having more screen real estate, as I demonstrated with the first blog post that I'd be happy to link you to. There's nothing more. It's worse, and you don't get more from it. Okay, fine, you want one. I'm not here to dissuade you from making that decision. It's your choice. Maybe not your choice. I don't know. Maybe that's going to die on the vine. I've got my notes here, and I definitely wanted to refer to them because I had an experience last night that would give me a better indicator as to whether or not I would feel different despite seeing the glaring software problems and the major trade-offs for minor gains at a distance. Remember, not a hardware guy. I'm a software guy. I had a chance yesterday to unbox this, the Essential phone, the PH-1, or just PH1, or the Essential phone as it's known. Unboxed it live in this channel, then we did a live TLDR in the other YouTube channel. We do a live TLDR every day actually, on weekends too. The Locker Gnome Daily Report, youtube.com/LockerGnome. And then on the podcast, right before we started recording it on the Twitch profile, I talked about how I messed up a part of the phone. So the reason why the Essential phone is important to bring up now, not because we're comparing the Essential phone to the iPhone 10, not because we're trying to compare iOS to Android, but for one very, very, very important reason, and I think everybody can see it. A notch. There's got to be a better word. So I'm going to go ahead and unlock it and show you that I've been using the phone. I've kind of been running it through its paces and seeing how well it works. I've got the calculator open. That's fine. It's normal-ish, but, you know, it does jump out even though there's a dark menu at the top. I'm going to back out, scroll over to the Google feed here, and you can see it really jumps out, and you can see a lot of seemingly wasted space. That would annoy me. And this is the same kind of wasted space we're going to see with the so-called ears that flank the iPhone 10's notch. Just white space. And then not only will we have white space at the top, oh yeah, the screen is on. It is illuminated. Is it usable? Is it pretty? That may be in a subjective opinion, but, you know, well, my subjective opinion is no, it's fugly. You know, so then you'd also on the iPhone 10 have to worry about space at the bottom not being touched or usable in any capacity. So that may very well be similar. But I'm talking specifically about this hardware inclusion at the top. This is the thing. That doesn't disappear, specifically in portrait mode. This right here, if I could not eliminate it in software, would annoy me. In landscape or portrait, and I will continue, it would annoy me. It jumps out. To think that this is going to melt away, maybe some of you are lucky. I'm not. I'm the type of person who notices the difference between 55 frames per second and 60 frames per second. I see these things. And once you see them, they're so difficult to unsee. I think this is potentially something that is an issue of the Essential phone. Other people would argue otherwise. I think something like this would be an issue on an iOS device. So it's not that I'm slagging Apple for that. I'd say Essential, yeah, I think you need to do more to mitigate this. Now, this is the difference. I'll let you just go ahead and illustrate the difference between what we've seen in the iPhone and what we've seen on the Essential to this point. So here we are in portrait mode. Here we are in landscape mode. Where'd it go? It disappeared completely. They made it melt into the background. It's not in the way. We've actually got a clean design here. That's just in the calculator app. Let's see what happens on the home screen, because I got home screen rotation on. There you go. Kind of disappears. Don't really see it anymore. There it is. It's still there at the top, but not there in this orientation. Apple's not going to work the same way. Ignore the graphics on the screen. I think, you know, because of the brightness, you can still see that effectively the inclusion, that the camera housing just disappears when you rotate in landscape mode. iOS isn't going to work that way. Why? Because the notch is there by design. Apple's not going to fix that in software. It's not meant to be fixed. It is meant to be developed around. That's the thing. You can expect Apple's going to address it. They're not. That's part of the problem. I mean, not just because they've failed to address a massive amount of software shortcomings in the past, but because they've literally told developers to embrace the notch. Even my daughter Jedi, if you can hear her in the background, she's hearing me talk about this again and she's crying. I know a lot of you are probably crying over that too, but I still have to talk about this because now I've had the experience of dealing with something that interrupts flow, interrupts what I believe is a fluid design and a good experience. So this is not an iPhone 10, but because of the way that it's working in portrait mode specifically, I kind of feel like I'm using an iPhone 10. Sorry, Essential. This is something that I did have to point out, the fact that, look at that, it's gone. Why doesn't Apple do that? Like, just by default. You don't have to tweak anything. You don't have to touch the screen or anything. It goes away by default. I love that. So here's what gives me hope about the Essential, to give them credit. They are actually paying attention to their community, and they are addressing issues one by one. They're doing a Reddit AMA, I think, every other week or so. And you're basically talking about what they're working on in software, and that is what's fantastic. So even if I'm pointing out this particular problem right now on the device that I'm using with a software revision, they're pushing out updates at probably breakneck speed compared to a lot of other Android OEMs. And if I make a request like, can you do something to effectively mitigate this in portrait mode, I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. I would be shocked if Apple did, because Apple, again, is using this notch as a branding exercise. So that when someone sees that phone at a distance, they know that they're staring at an iPhone. It's not about anything else. Maybe it's about bragging rights about having, you know, more screen, or a bezel-less design, which, you know, calls into question usability, especially, you know, when you start to try to use the phone. My daughter Jedi, who's crying right now, maybe because I'm not letting her play with it. I let her play with the Star Wars app on these devices. I lock it down, I pin it in Android at least, and she was trying to effectively operate the phone, and she was holding on to it. She was able to hold on to it with her hand, her tiny little hand, but couldn't get it to work because multi-touch support wasn't prevalent. That's the problem when you lose bezels. Suddenly you don't know how to hold your phone. You've got to literally hold it the right way, because you literally could hold it the wrong way, especially if the software does not know that there are 0 bezels or no usable holding space on a device. It agitates me because I literally do not understand why these bezels have been demonized, or suddenly it's a value that we have nothing to hold on to. Okay. I've got a few notes. I'm gonna turn back the notes. I'm getting a little emotional. I can't help it. These things they jump out at me. They're glaring software problems that have to work around glaring hardware issues. So let me just go to my next point. Obviously, the Essential is different, but I believe that at least they're accommodating it. You know, I don't think this is going to become the definition of an Essential phone, or at least I don't think it should. But the iPhone and Apple is taking a completely different track. It won't be fixed in software. It's meant to be worked around, and I think that's a problem. So if you thought any kind of wasted space was bad on this device, if you've seen screenshots of it at a distance or me playing around with it, you're going to have the same problem on an iPhone 10, the exact same problem, probably even worse, because that inclusion is much larger than this one. You know, moreover, if you made fun of Essential at any point in time for doing this, for putting the camera, the front-facing camera, where they did and accommodating it the way they did, then you need to be doing the same thing with Apple. Otherwise, you're not being fair to yourself. And I'd be shocked if anybody saw this outright and said, "Oh, wow, it's about time someone put a camera array like that and had it work, the software work around it. That's amazing." Maybe someone did. I am definitely not that person. But effectively, this confirmed my previous suspicions. I think the idea of doing something like this notch at the top of the screen, or any side of the screen, any part of the screen, it confirmed my suspicions that it was a good idea on paper, but in actual practicality in using it last night and just initial impressions, I was like, dude, I could not deal with that on a regular basis. I just couldn't. This is not a review of the Essential phone. I'm not slagging the Essential phone because, like I said, they may very well patch that with software. This is me, again, admonishing this type of pattern that we're now seeing surfaced because Apple's done it. Just because Apple did it doesn't mean it was a good idea. Just because Apple designed it doesn't mean it was good design. And it's now a myth. We have now entered into that part in our culture where Apple being synonymous with design is an absolute myth, because it's not true. Okay, back to the notes. There are far less emotions tied up in my notes. To dovetail to what I was saying in the beginning, it's not about screen space, it's about usable screen space. It's not about screen space, it's about a screen you want to look at. It's about screen that is balanced. It is about a good experience. And if the hardware does not provide a good experience for the software to shine, to do what it does well, well, that's definitely not a device that I would necessarily be interested or could necessarily recommend. At a distance, up close, in person, it's the software. It's always the software. It's always going to be about the software. For me, you rarely are going to hear me say otherwise. Even optimized apps may not even look nice on an iPhone 10 screen or an Essential screen. You can hold, at least you can, I'll give Essential this, you can hold it in landscape and it looks clean. It's that if the iPhone 10 is put out there and people start believing that it's amazing simply because Apple made it and it's the latest Apple device and they know what they're doing, I think I think we're in trouble. I mean, as a general industry, because that's not leadership. It isn't. Not as far as usability is concerned. Maybe as far as a different design or a different approach to what an iPhone can be, sure. But usability has to stay at the center point of any technological experience. You don't have to think very hard about having to think of an example. Have you ever tried to use a terminal, with buttons and a screen, and it was so painful to use because you're so used to something that's fluid and more responsive, but yet you have to use this horribly designed experience because the experience wasn't considered. It was like, well, it's software and hardware and it works. That's what happens when you don't keep usability at a center point of a technological or technology-oriented or experience or something with technology in it. And that's exactly what I see happening. So keep waiting for the iPhone. Maybe it's a blessing that the shipping times are probably going to blast back into 2018. Maybe that's a blessing. This is not slagging Apple's technological prowess in what they've done with that sensor array. I think it's amazing. Unfortunately, the baby is getting thrown out with the bathwater. Okay, again, back to no emotion. Maybe you enjoy watching people who don't have emotion when they talk about things they're passionate about. I'm passionate about usable technology experiences. I won't apologize for that. So I guess this is it's pretty much all I had written down. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. This is a branding exercise. Stop giving Apple excuses. Stop apologizing for them. They've made their bed. Now they're going to sleep in it. I don't think it's a good decision. I've now had an experience with something like it up close and in person. I confirmed all my suspicions. And maybe you have as well. Maybe you're still on that journey. Maybe you're like, fine, I can deal with it. Okay. That's good for you. I am definitely not aboard this train at all. Like it's just it's mind-numbingly impossible for me to wrap my head around this as an issue that we're dealing with in 2017. We seem to have taken so many steps backwards for the sake of progress. We seem to have made change for the sake of change. This hasn't made anything better. This new direction hasn't made anything better. It hasn't demonstrably made anything better. So why does it keep happening? Because one company does it, and then the other companies fall in line. Well, I'm not going to fall in line. I do love you. I appreciate you. At this point, however, I'm going to leave you to your own devices, even if that happens to be an iPhone 10. May the Force be with you.